burning it up until it's like...
That actually sounds really good. Did you get that?
We had this idea for this carnivorous plant show. We put together some drawings and some concepts and went in and proposed it to the conservatory.
6 years ago we proposed it. The concept was there, but you know, the execution, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure we could have done it, but I think right now we're at the prime time to make these pieces great. The show's called Savage Gardens. There's 4 main pieces that we're constructing. Our interpretation of carnivorous plants.
Those were the 4 that we thought could be best emulated with our techniques and materials. We really try to focus on projects that sort of combine, you know, my knowledge and metalwork with Tony's resin work. The idea has always been to sort of see these things, you know, from the bug's perspective, noticing details and aspects of these plants that are very, very hard to see because they're so small. You know, Tony and I were looking at the actual plant. We're sort of brainstorming about what materials. It's okay, the leaves are going to be metal, or we're going to use a base that looks like this, and then it's going to be about this big, and this is how the resin will attach to it. And we'll bring all of that together and plan out how to get started. I was thinking all this would be resin here, and then this would attach later.
It's all theory until you start pulling it off. You know, okay, this works and that doesn't work, and just back and forth, Mark, you know, what's going to work for you, what works for me, where, you know, it's finding that fine balance between the 2 art forms to make the piece happen.
The first piece that we started on was the trumpet plants. It seemed like the least intimidating thing to start on. For me, it was like the first thing that I needed to do to learn how we were going to proceed with the metal portion of it. And with so much of this, the metal had to be done before, you know, Tony can really start his resin sculpting process. Everything in the show is basically aluminum because the show would travel and some of these pieces are so huge, it just made sense to have something really light. It was an alloy of aluminum I've never worked with before, really soft. Actually, so much of the hammering on the aluminum and the forming, I really didn't even know was possible. So it took a little bit to figure out how this stuff was gonna, how the shapes were gonna hammer out and then weld together, and then, you know, all the welds being ground down so that it looks like seamless. We had to work with the powder coaters a lot. You know, we're getting this green, but it's still translucent to where we can see. You can sort of see the history of the fabrication, and it does kind of give it an interesting shine.
Once the metal was built, we take whatever dimensions we have on those pieces and bring them in here, and then we start sculpting and molding and casting. A lot of materials we use are silicones, and then we're casting 2-part urethanes. And 90% of the time we're dealing with transparent resins, and they start as a clear resin, and then we add color formulas into that to make the colors come out and work how we want them to work.
I do everything. Wherever Tony and Mark need me, that's where they'll put me. I've helped Mark work on all the sculptures out in the metal shop, grinding, sanding, and then a lot of times I'm in here mixing chemicals, matching colors that need to be made and stuff like that.
The sundew it started out as basically the two halves of the shell are welded together all along the edge. At that point, basically drilled many holes in the arms and then tapped them and then assembled them on a base and then figured out how to bolt it all together so that all the arms could come apart.
It was almost a month and a half of every day cycling these molds 3 times a day to get the 534 resin dew droplets on there, and each one of those was cast with some threads in it. Once we've casted a few, we figured out what the weights needed to be, and we'd actually inject each one of the molds with X amount of clear color, and then we'd follow it up with red to get the red and clear look, because that's kind of the way they look in nature. And then within that, when we did those castings, we actually had a throughway put into the casting so that we could slide a fiber optic into it. And then there was the nightmare of pulling all those fiber optics through those pieces. When that piece came together to finally, it's something to see it on paper and the concept, and all of a sudden the pieces and the parts all in different spots, but when it came together, it was like, wow.
These are the times that I designed this.
The big tropical pitcher plant, the Nepenthes, that you can go inside. We looked at that thing, and this thing had fangs and these winglet things with the sharp, spiky stuff. And it was this just crazy big bucket with texture on it. We needed to, try it out with a scale model before we burned up thousands of dollars worth of metal. We could actually have a smaller version of it to look at. It needs a little more curve here or a little less, or maybe the opening's not the right size. Those are the kinds of things that are really hard to get from a paper sketch.
The pin fell out of your head. I'm going to demonstrate how to break a tab. In the floor, there's 210 LEDs. There's like a light panel that's mounted underneath.
Flytrap is, the most necessary plant when you're trying to do a carnivorous plant show. It's the plant that we all remember as a kid and being been fascinated with. So that was the piece that we really wanted to make viewer interactive, you know, with the snapping shut and sound. To try to make the piece more like a learning tool as well as, you know, something visual and fun. Heat is always an issue that we learned is going to be a problem with this.
Wild part is just talking about the environments these things are going into. You know, the temperatures in the greenhouse, and we have to just make sure everything can handle that temperature and the moisture levels in there, and keeping the oil cool enough so that it doesn't botch up in the hydraulic lines. You know, it's like, okay.
A lot of little details on this. How do all these things work, and where do they fit, and how do they fit in here? And then that went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it works. So it puts a big smile on your face to know that it runs after all of that.
The Venus, it has an inner core piece that's going to move, that the pistons will move that, and then on top of that will be a rubber skin. And this is the silicone rubber going in, and this piece actually gets pulled out, and all this will become a void inside the rubber. So when we pull it out, the piston can fit back in there, and there's enough room around the piston so we're not overstretching the rubber as these things are actuated. It's a learning experience, and you get to learn something new, which makes the job that much more fun. There's folders upon folders of, you know, just research material. What's going to work best, what's going to last the longest, so that the conservatory is not having to do tons of maintenance on it, trying to make it to all they have to do is plug and play.
It really feels like it's the biggest project that we've worked on that really has utilized everything that we've learned in working together for the last 10 years. What's changed is that we're designing the pieces around what we can showcase that Tork is really good at, which is, you know, doing these large scale, you know, translucent metal, resin sculpture pieces. It sort of feels like where to go from here though now.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. It's like, whoa.